They found her in silence. No red carpet, no applause, no cameras left rolling. Just a frail woman in a hospice bed in Palm Springs, the same woman who once made Hollywood weep. At 84, Sally Kirkland, the fiery soul behind Anna, the role that earned her an Oscar nomination and a Golden Globe, took her final bow. But the world barely noticed. That's the cruel paradox of fame. One day, your tears win awards the next. They're shed in private, unseen, unremembered. Yet this isn't the story of a forgotten actress. It's the story of a woman who lived like a flame, too bright, too wild until the world could no longer keep up. She was once the muse of Andy Warhol, the rebel of New York's art underground, and the woman who redefined what fearless meant in a business built on fear. But behind the stage lights, behind the makeup and silk, there was a darker truth, one she never escaped. Before the fall came the fire, and before the silence, there was the scream that nobody heard. Stay until the end, because what really happened to Sally Kirkland will change the way you see Hollywood's idea of beauty, fame, and survival. Before Hollywood learned her name, Sally Kirkland was already a force of chaos wrapped in silk. Born in 1,941 inches, New York City, to a fashion editor, mother, and an artist father, she grew up in a world that sparkled with glamour but hid deep fractures underneath. Her mother wrote about beauty for magazines, yet at home, beauty often came with bruises of neglect. Sally once said, "I grew up surrounded by mirrors, but no one ever looked at me." That loneliness became her fuel. By her early 20s, she wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing truth. She found herself drawn into Andy Warhol's factory, that electric playground where art met madness, where glitter covered pain, and where boundaries existed only to be broken. While others played characters, Sally became them. She painted emotions on her skin, stripped off shame in underground performances, and made vulnerability her weapon. Hollywood wasn't ready for her. She wasn't the polished ingenue they wanted. She was raw, loud, poetic, a walking confession. Directors called her too emotional. Casting agents called her too real. And yet, that very too much would later make her unforgettable. Her breakout came in 1987, with Anna, a film about an aging actress losing her spotlight to the next generation. It was heartbreak disguised as fiction. In truth, Sally was Anna. She poured her soul into the role until the line between character and self disappeared. When she won the Golden Globe, she didn't smile. She cried, not tears of victory, but of recognition. The industry had finally seen the woman it once dismissed. But as every Hollywood story teaches, the higher the rise, the thinner the air. And for Sally, the spotlight that once felt warm would soon start to burn. Sally Kirkland's childhood was a beautiful lie. From the outside, it looked like a painting. New York's Upper East Side, a mother in designer dresses, a father who painted abstract dreams. But inside that apartment, silence was louder than any argument. Her mother, also named Sally Kirkland, was the fashion editor for Vogue, a woman who shaped how America defined beauty. Yet she couldn't tell her own daughter that she was beautiful. The young Sally grew up watching her mother photograph models, touch silk, and praise perfection, while she herself felt like a mistake someone forgot to retouch. She once told an interviewer, "My mother dressed the world, but I was the one left naked." That sentence explains everything that came after. At 9 years old, she began performing plays alone in her bedroom audiences made of shadows and broken dolls. By 13, she wrote letters to herself signed "Love Sally" because no one else would. She wasn't acting yet. She was surviving. When she turned 17, she ran away from home. Not out of rebellion, but to find a place where emotion wasn't punished. She found it in off-Broadway theaters, where tears were currency and madness was an art form. It was there she discovered her first addiction, the stage. In the chaos of 1,960 seconds, New York, she lived like fire catching wind. She painted sets for pennies, slept on floors, took roles that most actresses wouldn't touch. The girl who once begged to be seen was now daring the world to look away. Those who knew her then said she had a light that made people uneasy. She wasn't trying to be famous, she was trying to prove she existed. And in proving that, she began to build a myth. But even as her legend took shape, the wound inside her never closed. It would follow her through every stage door, every performance, every love that collapsed under the weight of her intensity. Because some fires aren't meant to be controlled, they burn to remind the world they're alive. And Sally Kirkland's flame was only getting started. When Sally Kirkland first walked into Andy Warhol's factory, the room stopped breathing. The air smelled of paint, cigarettes, and electricity, like the 1,960 seconds themselves were exploding in slow motion. On the walls, mirrors reflected faces that didn't want to be real. Artists, models, and outcasts, all orbiting around one pale sun named Warhol. Sally didn't belong there, and yet she fit perfectly. While most came to the factory to become famous, she came to become free. She performed naked poetry, read lines soaked in blood and heartbreak, and painted herself with words instead of color. Every performance was part ritual, part rebellion. Warhol once called her the soul of vulnerability. To him, she wasn't a muse. She was the mirror, the one person in the room who didn't pretend to be anything. But truth in a world built on illusion is dangerous. Her boldness drew attention and punishment. Studio heads whispered her name with fascination, then erased it with fear. Directors admired her fire, but feared it couldn't be contained on camera. By the early 1970 seconds, she was cast in films that lived on the edge of art and obscenity. Coming Apart, The Sting of Success, The Telephone Book. Roles no one else dared to touch. She wasn't acting. She was exercising her pain in front of an audience. Yet with every role, the line between Sally the actress and Sally the human blurred. She once said, "Every time I cried on screen, I lost something I could never get back." That was the price of fearlessness, authenticity that consumed itself. While other actresses built careers, Sally built scars. Her name never appeared on studio shortlists. Her face rarely graced magazine covers, but in underground circles, she became a legend, an icon of raw emotion, the goddess of cinematic danger. Still, fame never paid the rent. She lived between film sets and borrowed couches, teaching acting classes to survive. The woman who once stood beside Warhol now stood in front of students, warning them that truth in Hollywood was a weapon that could kill the one who wielded it. But even then, she smiled, defiant, luminous, unbroken. Because Sally Kirkland wasn't chasing approval anymore. She was chasing something purer, the art that could finally love her back. And soon, that art would come knocking in the form of a script titled Anna, a story that would make her immortal and destroy her all at once. In 1987, the world finally turned its head towards Sally Kirkland. She was 46, too old by Hollywood's cruel standards, too scarred by years of near invisibility. Yet in Anna, she delivered a performance so raw it felt less like acting and more like a woman bleeding truth onto film. Anna told the story of an aging actress, forgotten by an industry that had moved on. But for Sally, it wasn't a script, it was a mirror. The lines she spoke on screen were echoes of her own life. The loneliness, the desperation, the quiet rage of being replaced by youth. And for 2 hours, she turned pain into poetry. Critics called her a revelation. Meryl Streep reportedly wept after seeing her performance. When the Golden Globe was placed in her trembling hands, she whispered, "I've waited my whole life to be seen." For a brief, shimmering moment, the universe answered. She was nominated for an Oscar, photographed by Vanity Fair, and adored by the same industry that once turned its back on her. Hollywood suddenly remembered the woman it had left behind. But success in her case was never a reward, it was a test. After Anna, the scripts didn't flood in. Studios didn't know what to do with a woman who could outfeel everyone in the room. She wasn't marketable. She was real, and real terrified them. Instead of big-budget blockbusters, she took indie roles, spiritual journeys, and open-heart projects. She posed for controversial art photos, taught acting as therapy, and spoke openly about near-death experiences and God. She said once, after Anna, "I didn't want to play a role. I wanted to heal." Yet behind that spirituality lay exhaustion, decades of fighting to exist in a business that only wanted fragments of her. Her health began to falter, her money disappeared, and fame faded as swiftly as it had returned. Still, she kept performing, sometimes on stage, sometimes in church halls, sometimes in living rooms where no camera rolled. Because for Sally, art wasn't about applause anymore. It was the only language she had left. But as the years slipped away, so did the light around her. And soon, the woman who once embodied every feeling imaginable would face her most merciless role yet, living through the tragedy of being forgotten by the world she once gave everything to. Fame doesn't end with a crash. It fades with a whisper. And for Sally Kirkland, that whisper became her only audience. By the 2000s, her name, once engraved in gold, had become a footnote, an echo of a bygone era when emotion was currency and truth was dangerous. She still acted, yes, but the roles grew smaller, the sets colder, bit parts in films no one saw, cameos that felt like ghosts of what once was. The woman who once broke hearts on screen was now fighting to keep her own beating. Decades of emotional extremes, of living too deeply, had taken their toll. Her body began to betray her broken bones, surgeries, infections that never fully healed. She could barely afford treatment. Friends organized GoFundMe pages to keep her in care. Hollywood, the same place that had once given her a standing ovation, now turned away. In one of her final interviews, she smiled weakly and said, "I used to teach people how to open their hearts. Now I'm just trying to keep mine open." Her home in Palm Springs became her last stage. There were no cameras, no applause, just caregivers, morphine, and memories. But even then, she kept performing for them, for herself, for God. She prayed aloud, recited poetry from memory, told stories about Andy Warhol and angels, as if they were the same thing. To those who visited, she was radiant, fragile, yes, but still carrying that wild spark in her eyes. One nurse said, she had whisper lines from old movies in her sleep, as if she never stopped acting. And then, quietly, she slipped away. No headlines, no grand farewell, just silence. The kind of silence that feels sacred, as if the universe was holding its breath for her one last time. She died on the 11th of November 2025, at the age of 84. The same woman who once set the screen on fire, now resting in the stillness she had spent her entire life running from. But death did not erase her. It revealed her in the way only forgotten legends are ever truly seen. Because Sally Kirkland's tragedy was never that she fell. It was that the world stopped looking up before she landed. In her final years, Sally Kirkland lived like a flickering candle, soft, trembling, but unextinguished. She no longer chased premieres or magazine covers. Instead, she spoke at churches, art workshops, and tiny film festivals that still remembered the woman who dared to be real. Those who met her in those later years often described the same thing, a presence that filled the room, even when her voice could barely rise above a whisper. She wore bright scarves and rings that caught the light, as if refusing to let the world forget that color once defined her. And when someone asked if she missed the red carpets, she smiled and said, "Honey, I never left Hollywood. Hollywood left me." Still, she never let bitterness win. She taught acting as if it were a form of prayer, telling her students, "Every emotion is sacred if it's honest." She appeared in small indie projects, lending her name not for fame but for faith. Faith that storytelling could still heal, even if the world had stopped watching. She also became deeply spiritual, speaking about God, reincarnation, and the unseen energy that binds art to the soul. Her home was a mosaic of icons, candles, and photographs of the people she loved and lost. Andy Warhol, Shelley Winters, Ed Harris, her students, and the ghosts of her past selves. When she could no longer travel, she made phone calls instead, long, meandering conversations with friends, journalists, and strangers. She would ask about their dreams before talking about her own. It was as if she knew her story was winding down, and she wanted to help others find their light before hers went dark. By the time she entered hospice care, she was still performing, whispering old lines, blessing nurses, joking about her Oscar loss as if it were all part of a play that never ended. Her friends say she passed peacefully, surrounded by the hum of oxygen machines and her favorite Sinatra record. And somewhere between those final breaths, Hollywood's forgotten rebel finally found what she had spent her whole life seeking: quiet recognition. Because though the world had moved on, the art never did. Anna still flickers on late-night television. Her voice still trembles through decades of film reels. And her story, the woman who refused to fake a single emotion, still haunts the hearts of those who believe cinema should mean something. In the end, Sally Kirkland didn't vanish. She simply became what every true artist becomes: light, scattered across memory. In the quiet after her passing, Hollywood suddenly remembered her name. Headlines called her the woman who gave everything for art. Younger actresses posted black and white photos of her with trembling captions. She showed us how to feel. It was strange, poetic even, that the industry which forgot her in life would now celebrate her in death. But that's the nature of legends. They only burn brighter once the fire's gone out. Sally Kirkland's legacy doesn't rest in box office numbers or awards. It lives in the rebellion she embodied, the permission she gave others to be too much. Before her, actresses were told to be graceful, silent, ornamental. After her, they began to bleed on camera, to cry without vanity, to be both beautiful and broken. You can see her fingerprints in every performance that feels too real. In Frances McDormand's Quiet Fury, in Kate Blanchett's Unraveling Grace, in every woman who refuses to apologize for feeling deeply. Film historians call her work in Anna one of the purest performances of the 20th century, a portrait of truth painted in pain. Acting schools still study her emotional transparency, a technique she pioneered when she told her students, "If you lie in a scene, you lie to God." But perhaps her greatest impact lies beyond cinema. Sally became a symbol for those who live on the margins, the artists, the dreamers, the broken believers, who never stop searching for meaning in a world that rewards masks. She proved that vulnerability is a kind of defiance, and that survival, in itself, can be art. Even now, fans gather online to share her interviews and rare clips moments where she speaks with eyes that seem to see through the illusion of fame. In those fragments, she feels alive again, unfiltered, unafraid, unforgettable. And so, the myth of Sally Kirkland lives on, not in the spotlight she once craved, but in the quiet hearts she touched. The world might call her a tragic figure, but for those who understand her, she was never a tragedy. She was a truth too bright to dim. Some stories don't belong to fame, they belong to truth. And Sally Kirkland's life was one long, unflinching truth, raw, unsanitized, and terrifyingly human. In an industry obsessed with surfaces, she dared to live from the inside out. While others memorized lines, she lived them. While others played characters, she became confession. Maybe that's why Hollywood didn't know what to do with her. She wasn't built for the machinery of celebrity. She was built for the chaos of art. She didn't sell fantasy. She sold pain, and the world doesn't buy that easily. But what's haunting isn't how she fell, it's what she stood for. In every trembling close-up, she forced us to see the cost of being real in a place addicted to illusion. She showed that the same heart that wins awards is the one that breaks first. We can't pretend her story is just about neglect or injustice. It's also about choice, her choice to live without compromise, to feel everything even when it hurt too much. And maybe that's why her life resonates so deeply today. In a world where authenticity has become performance, Sally Kirkland didn't chase the algorithm of fame. She chased transcendence. She wanted art to mean something. And in that pursuit, she gave everything: her youth, her beauty, her body, her peace of mind. To some, that makes her a victim. To others, a saint of cinema. To us, she is a reminder that every frame, every tear, every act of courage comes from somewhere fragile and irreplaceable. And maybe that's the lesson her story leaves behind. Greatness isn't about how long the world remembers you. It's about how deeply you lived while it did. The curtain never truly falls for souls like hers. Somewhere, in an old reel flickering on a forgotten projector, Sally Kirkland is still alive, still trembling, still giving too much of herself to a scene that ended decades ago. You can almost hear the soft buzz of film, the ghost of her laughter echoing through an empty theater. She's standing there again, fearless, radiant, uncontained, a woman who refused to dim her light just because the world stopped watching. Her story isn't just a tragedy. It's a requiem for every artist who ever dared to feel too much, for every dreamer who gave the world their soul and got silence in return, for every woman who was told she was too much and chose to stay that way anyway. Some say she was consumed by her own fire, but maybe that was the point, to burn bright enough that the darkness could never claim her completely. And if you close your eyes for just a moment, you can still see her in the flicker of a candle, in the shimmer of old film, in the quiet defiance of every artist who refuses to fake a smile. Because Sally Kirkland didn't die forgotten. She became a whisper, carried by time, proof that even in obscurity, truth survives. Some stories were never meant to be known, but now, you know.